When I got to the Cleveland Browns, I felt I was the best receiver by far.
Wow.
Right away. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I felt I was the best athlete on the team, not by far.
Is there one memory that fans most want to talk to you about? One game?
Well, yeah, the double overtime game against the Jets where we came back and beat the Jets. And then we went on into the AFC Championship against the Denver Broncos. Those two games are, referred more than ever.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Club 46, driven by Bridgestone. I'm Jay Crawford. This is the show where we get the opportunity to sit down with former and current all-time great Cleveland Browns. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by former wide receiving great Brian Brennan. Brian, great to see you.
Thank you, Jay.
You're in terrific shape. You look like you could strap on some pads and run routes.
If the Browns want to win today, they don't want me out there today.
But you do. You've clearly taken care of yourself, and it looks like the game wasn't as rough on you as it's been on some of your colleagues.
I don't know. Inside my body, it feels pretty rough these days at age 57. My wife Bethany and I like to run and work out and stuff. Yeah.
Well, obviously, Brian, you were part of some iconic teams here with the Cleveland Browns, and you're still in the area, so I'm sure you're rubbing elbows with Cleveland Browns fans constantly. Is there one memory that fans most want to talk to you about, one game?
Well, yeah, the double overtime game against the Jets where we came back and beat the Jets. And then we went on into the AFC Championship against the Denver Broncos. Those two games are, referred more than ever. I work at KeyBank here in town, and when I walk through Cleveland or through the airport, people of our generation come up. The younger generation, they don't even know who I am. But a lot of the older generation will come up and mention those games.
It's incredible because that game was over 30 years ago, which it's hard to believe. But that moment, for me anyhow, still seems to be the crescendo of Browns fandom. Because unlike, there were moments in the drive and the fumble games where it looked like maybe, but at the end, it was a letdown. But that Jets game, it's still held up by many fans to be their most euphoric moment as a Browns fan. What, for you, stands out about that game?
Well, I remember back in the 1986 season, we always felt we were the best team in the league.
Yeah.
And it ended up that Denver beat us to go on. But that Jets game, we had that never give up kind of attitude. And, Bernie Kosar was our quarterback. He had Mack and Biner. You had Webster and Langhorne. You had Ozzie Newsome. You had Herman Fontenot. You had a very good offensive line, Cody Rise and Mike Babb and such. So we felt we could do anything on offense. And sometimes we would sputter, but we'd always come back. And true enough, in that game, Kosar led us back. Reggie had a big play. Webster had a big play. There's an interference call on me. And we just kind of methodically went down. Gastineau helped us out a little bit.
Yeah, he did.
On fourth down, I had the roughing penalty against Kosar. But when Bernie was quarterback, we felt we could do anything.
Was there a moment in that game before it ended where you even kind of looked up at the clock and you saw what little time was left and thought, we can't pull a rabbit out of this hat?
Yeah, sometimes as a player, you're like, oh, well, it was a great season. But, once you get on that field and you start getting a little momentum and the talent we had, a little intestinal fortitude of that team, it permeated. So, yeah, we did feel good in any situation. Yeah. We were 12-4, and then we, we beat the Jets, and then we go on to play Denver, and we had Denver beaten in that 1986 season. And it's just a disappointing, way to end, with, overtime there, to lose to the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship. But that was a special time for me. And if you ask any of my teammates, they would say the same thing. The camaraderie of that team was exceptional. Marty Schottenheimer was our head coach, and we had a great defense, and the offense could do anything, in our opinion.
Have you ever felt energy inside a building like there was the final couple of minutes of that Jets game?
People, half the fans left and came back because we were down, right? So, and some of the fans have come up to me today. So I left and I came back in the game when I heard the roars and such. So it was quiet for moments, but once we, there was a clear sign that we were coming back. It was euphoric to beat the Jets like that. We haven't seen that in Cleveland in 30 plus years, as you say. So it's a memory for me that I'll never forget.
Yeah, it was a fun time to be a Browns fan. We're going to come back to your time with the Browns in a little bit, but I want to kind of start by going back to what life was like for you, young Brian Brennan, growing up just outside Detroit in Bloomfield, Michigan. What was your young years like?
So I grew up in Bloomfield, Michigan, just outside Detroit. I went to a Catholic elementary school. I went to a Catholic high school, Brother Rice High School, very similar to St. Ignatius or St. Ed's, 1,200, boys in a Catholic school. I played football. I ran track. I played basketball. Just loved to play sports. My father owned a construction company, and all the Brennan brothers, I'm one of 4 boys in the family. There's 6 of us. And we all worked construction in the summer and the jackhammer and things like that.
Wow.
So you learned to get an education. You didn't want to be stuck on that jackhammer for the rest of your life. Yeah, and then I went on and had some success in high school and was recruited. I remember taking college visits for football to Pittsburgh, University of Minnesota, Michigan State, Boston College. And after I went to Boston College, I knew I was done.
Yeah.
It was in Boston. I loved that. I felt it offered me a great education. It was Catholic.
Yeah.
All the things that meant a lot to me. So I ended up at Boston College, and there's this quarterback by the name of Doug Flutie that comes. He's a year younger than me, so when I was a sophomore, he shows up, and he clearly was just a great player.
Yeah.
Kind of commanded everything. But yeah, so and then I got drafted in 1984 by the Cleveland Browns, and here I sit. So many years later, a Cleveland resident.
Yeah. Do you credit your work ethic, not just in your professional football life, but in your afterlife, to those early years working for in a hard-working profession, either picking up nails as a young kid, whatever it was that you were doing? You saw through your dad's example that for a good life, there was a good, honest day's work.
Yeah, my dad was a special guy. He got up before all of us. He was gone, and at night sometimes he would come home late, just trying to get different construction jobs throughout the Detroit area. Worked really hard, did very well at the end of the day. Put us all through private schools and on and through college, and watching what he did, and then post-career. The hard thing for an athlete is after you play, trying to transition to the next career.
Yeah.
So his work ethic. And even my brother Marty, who is older than me, he went to Wall Street and worked for Merrill and Donaldson, Lufkin, Jenrette, UBS, wow. and he did quite well in his trading of bonds, U.S. government bonds. And I tried to, after I was done, I bridged over into the finance world, and I saw how he did it.
Is that what you studied at BC?
Yeah, I was a finance major. Yeah. I never thought I'd play in the NFL.
Really?
I went to Boston College to get an education, and then through, Flutie getting there and a lot of other opportunities that fell my way. The draft, I remember the draft, 1984 draft, I was drafted the 104th player selected, and Paul Warfield called, my phone rings in the dorm, my dorm room. There's no really ESPN, so hi, this is Paul Warfield. We just selected you in the 4th round. I'm like, oh my God, I just got drafted in the NFL. I want to put Sam Bertigliano on the phone. He's our head coach. I'm like, oh, Sam who? Okay, yeah, hey. Welcomes me, and then here I am,
It was such a different time. There was no pre-draft 24-hour news cycle on who's going to go where. And so did you have any idea where you might be drafted, what round, which teams were interested?
I always thought that I don't know why the Miami Dolphins with Don Shula. I don't know why. I can't remember exactly why, but there seemed to be some interest from the Dolphins and the Seahawks. Seahawks had Steve Largent. Maybe I fit that kind of pro style. But I was surprised when I got drafted by the Browns. But being from Detroit, I was thrilled because I do remember some of those, cardiac kids kind of generation with Sipe and Robert Jackson and the Pruitt brothers and Dave Logan and.
Let's go back to your early years in Bloomfield. How did your sports journey begin? What was it that? How were you introduced to sports, and who were the guys that you sort of looked to as your heroes?
Back in my childhood, growing up in Bloomfield, candidly, a lot of my friends played golf and tennis.
You're a country club kid.
Maybe a little bit, but so I went a different path, and I just liked basketball a lot.
Yeah.
And baseball, but I was an All-American basketball player in high school, and was recruited to some of the Ivy League schools. And
Point guard?
Yeah, point guard, and some of the MAC schools. But I don't know, I just fell into the football thing with Boston College, and I ended up going to BC. But looking back in my, I lived for sports, right? Everybody has a different interest. I lived for
Lions,
sports.
Tigers, Pistons,
Oh yeah, Bill
Wings.
Freehan was a great Detroit Tiger.
Oh, yeah.
And he lived on our street, and my sister Therese was very friendly with his daughters, and so I got to know Bill, who didn't have a son. So Bill Freehan, the great Tiger catcher, kind of followed my career a little
Wow.
bit. He and my father were friendly, so so he was somebody I looked up to, certainly emulated. He had Joe Schmidt. You had Lem Barney, you had Charlie Sanders, old Detroit Lions. But I always figured myself I was going to be a running back, but I ended up being a high school quarterback. And as a matter of fact, Syracuse actually recruited me as a college quarterback.
Really?
Yeah, but I ended up playing receiver, and I was never a receiver until I got to college.
That's interesting.
I was recruited as a safety in all the, Pitt and everywhere else I went. But when I got there, BC says, we really have this need for receiver. I said, all right, I'll play receiver, I don't care. So I play receiver,
Wow.
and then Flutie shows up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So was there a point in your early years where you realized football was your track? Because I know you said you were an All-American basketball player, but it ends up football is your path. When did that sort of click for you?
Well, it clicked my senior year at Brother Rice. I was getting more big-time offers to play football than basketball. Not that the MAC is not big-time, but the larger schools, the renowned college sports programs, Pitt, Syracuse, I don't know, Michigan State,
Sure.
were coming after me for football. So that was where it really clicked. So an opportunity to have my school paid for, scholarship, helped me choose football. But at Boston College, the basketball coach Gary Williams, who I loved, and great, who went on to win the national championship at Maryland.
Yeah. Coached at Ohio State.
Ohio State, yes, we're still friendly. Asked me to play basketball.
Wow.
But the head football coach, Jack Bicknell, would not allow me to play basketball, so that was one sport.
Wow. So I'm guessing, being one myself, when you're a Catholic kid in the Midwest, Notre Dame is kind of, that's where you're going to go.
That's pretty funny.
Did you think Notre Dame and they didn't call, or were you just never interested in Notre Dame?
I would have gone to Notre Dame tomorrow, and I remember Dan Devine was the head coach, and they said I was too small to play at Notre Dame. So obviously, then I hated Notre Dame, and I still hate Notre Dame today. And all my Dome heads, you know what? You can have the Dome. I'll take Boston College all day.
Very good.
Yeah, but we ended up playing Notre Dame. Jerry Faust was the head football coach at Notre Dame. And in 1983, my senior year at Boston College, I graduated before, so my senior year in playing fall sport, we played Notre Dame in the Liberty Bowl. And we ended up losing to Jerry Faust and Notre Dame.
Yeah. Was that the only time you guys played in your career?
I did, 18-19. And then BC got on the schedule with Notre Dame, for a series.
How did you look at that game, the Liberty Bowl, knowing that this was a place that you would have gone, it's closer to home, it is Notre Dame? What were your feelings when you stepped onto the field?
All of us, right? Everybody at Boston College probably got passed over for the most part by Notre Dame, right? So we had something to prove, and we kept with them, and candidly, we should have won the game. It was the coldest game I ever played in my life.
Wow,
and
that's saying something.
It was bitter cold, but in Liberty Bowl in Memphis. Don't go to Memphis on December 30th, I'll tell you that. But yeah, so that had a great deal of meaning for all of us. Yeah.
You mentioned the phone call from Paul Warfield. I'm sure growing up when you did, you knew what that meant. You knew who Paul was, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah,
So what
Miami
was
Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns and World Football League, that Paul Warfield.
What was your reaction when it kind of settled down after you hung up and thought, wow, I just
Well, I got drafted
Paul
in the fourth round, 104th player. In my opinion, I thought I should have gone to the second round.
Really?
Yeah, I look at the players that were going in front of me, these receivers, I'm like, who are these guys? You know what I'm talking about? But then when I finally got the call, it was really a magical moment for me. I mean, it was just, the call every college football player hopes to get. Back then there were 12 rounds. Ernest Biner that year was the 12th round selection for the Cleveland Browns. Don Rogers was the first round selection. And I was just thrilled to be drafted in the NFL by anyone. And still, I still tell the story about how it was Paul Warfield. And then when I got to be a Brown in Cleveland and I was a rookie, it seemed Paul Warfield, I was having quick success in training camp, and Paul Warfield took some extra time with me on how to get off the line of scrimmage as a receiver.
Wow.
When we played back in the 80s and early 90s, the bump and run was prevalent.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't get off the line of scrimmage, you could not play in the NFL. And Paul Warfield took some time with me and really helped me learn how to do that.
Was there a welcome to the NFL moment for you? I love talking to guys about that kind of second when either they look across the line of scrimmage and they see someone that they've watched in the NFL for years, or your first touchdown. What was yours?
During the first mini camp as a rookie, I was still at Boston College, but they bring you out in April or May. I'd forgotten. Maybe I just graduated Boston College. Well, you have a snack in the middle of these mini camps, and back in Baldwin Wallace campus days is where we had, our facility. And I went outside just to sit on a blocking dummy to have my sandwich and apple, which they gave you. And who was out there but, Cousineau and Clay Matthews.
Wow.
And they were accomplished, and they looked like, Charlie Atlas, right? I mean, and here I am looking, hey, it's Mickey Mouse. Hey, I'm here in the NFL. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
But they both became friends, and, but that Clay Matthews was a special athlete and a fun guy, and just being, knowing he was on the team and things like that.
Was there a guy maybe in your position room, somebody on the team that took you under their wing and said, this is the way you're a professional football player, this is how you do it?
I wish, but no.
Really?
We didn't have that. They were rebuilding the receiver corps, really.
Yeah.
I ended up coming in and starting as a rookie. Durrell Harris, the great Miami Dolphin, was on our team at the time, and he and I were kind of the starters that year. But Ozzie Newsome, I would point to Ozzie Newsome, who was a tight end, and if you can emulate Ozzie Newsome, you're doing the right things. Ozzie Newsome was the first player on the field. He was one of the last players off the field. He caught the ball, and at the end of the practice, he caught the ball, I'm like, this guy never goes in, so Ozzie, I would say.
There was, is it true that Will McDonough called Sam Rutigliano and said, you've got to look at this kid from Boston College? Is that true?
I think so. That's how Sam tells the story.
Yeah.
So I guess the story is the great sports writer for the Boston Globe, Will McDonough, who was renowned, had called Sam and said, if you're looking to be successful on offense, you may want to take a look at Brian Brennan from Boston College.
Wow.
And when it became Sam's turn to choose in the 1984 draft, I was selected by the Browns.
Did you have a relationship with Will? Did you know that he thought so highly of you?
No, I was, Boston College was, the Patriots weren't very good when I was at Boston College.
Right.
And we were beating Penn State, and we were beating Pitt, and we were beating Texas A&M, and we were beating Stanford, and you had Flutie there, so there's a lot of, press around the Boston College football team.
Right.
So Will McDonough wasn't writing about the Patriots, he was writing about the, Boston College team.
Right. When you got to camp that first year, and you looked around and assessed what was there at wide receiver, you had to be pretty excited about landing in Cleveland, because this gave you an opportunity to really come in and make a mark right away.
When I got to the Cleveland Browns, I felt I was the best receiver by far.
Wow.
Right away. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I felt I was the best athlete on the team, not by far. But
Close.
I felt you want to play ping pong, you want to play golf, you want to play anything, racquetball, you want to, whatever you want to do.
Bring it.
Bring it. It's how I felt about my, abilities as a rookie. And, the only thing I had to really harvest and from others, and Paul Warfield was kind enough to allow me to do it, is how to get off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Because in college, it wasn't all that, prevalent, but in the pros it was. And I was going against, Minifield and Dixon and, these kind of, on my own team.
Sure.
That was like birth by fire.
How did that impact your professional career, at least in the early stages? Going against those guys every single day, then when you line up against the other teams, you're like, this isn't the way it is in practice.
Hanford Dixon was a great player and a great athlete, all-pro, cornerback, first-round draft pick. Frank Minifield was like a cat out there. He was so athletic, and he could jump through and dunk a basketball, and he was a little like me. He's 5'11". And going against those two guys every practice, Langhorne, Slaughter, myself, Gerald McNeil, Clarence Weathers, it was bad. We were battling those guys, and they made us better.
Yeah.
And we made them better because the opponents back then were like the Houston Oilers and the Pittsburgh Steelers still. But the Houston Oilers had like Givens and, Louis Lips was at Pittsburgh. And, so it made them better as well.
Yeah.
Minifield and Dixon, I think.
So when you come to Cleveland, being from Detroit, you have some sort of an idea. They're first cousins. You know what Cleveland is and the kind of people that come from Cleveland. What was your takeaway after being here for a season? When you consider all the other places you could have landed, how did you feel about being here in Cleveland?
I was thrilled. I mean, my parents can drive in, quickly enough and see the games. And like you said, the people in Detroit are, hard-nosed, a lot of blue-collar workers in a sense. And Cleveland had the same kind of core, the same kind of character, fiber of people. And, I'd walk through town and it seemed like even back then, I fit in.
Yeah.
To the Cleveland,
You're one of us.
Way. And yeah, right. I felt like I was one of the, Clevelanders.
Yeah.
And I stayed here after I played. People say, why did you stay in Cleveland after you played? Yeah, I felt like I was, part of Cleveland. That's,
Yeah. Is there something about the Browns fan base that separates this group from every other group? And if you talk to any fan base, Bills, any fan base in the NFL, they'll say we've got the best fans.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's no fan base like this. So what is it that separates our fan base from the other teams?
Well, I played for the Bengals.
Right.
And then I played for the Chargers later in my career. And I was embarrassed in a way being a Bengal. The fans there had didn't know what it was like to be a fan. They were fair weather fans, and they would wear their blazers more so to the game than their sweatshirts. And then in San Diego, there were so many other things for the people of San Diego to do that fan base was different. It was just a marriage between the team and the people of Northeast Ohio that exceeds any other city, in my opinion. Just you go back, and I learned a little bit, to Canton and Massillon High School and Paul Brown, and I think that permeates Northeast Ohio, and that's why I think the Cleveland Browns fan is a step above all the other fans for all the other teams in the NFL. Then if you look, the Bay Area Browns backers, the London Browns backers, the Fort Myers Browns backers.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere, and I just think it's special, and I don't know how else to describe it, but it's unique.
It's not so much the rivalry it used to be, but the Browns and the Bengals used to be a real thing. And I think when Sam Weiss grabbed that mic and said, you're in Cincinnati, you're not in Cleveland, that just threw gas on the fire. And then later, you end up playing there. Was there a sense of awkwardness that now you're behind enemy lines and you're one of them?
It was adding fuel to the fire, as you said.
Yes.
You had Boomer Esiason, we had Bernie. You had James Brooks, we had Ernest Miner. You had, Brown and Collinsworth, we had Langhorne, Slaughter. We had, some similarities. You had a hard-nosed coach in White, respected. You had Marty Schottenheimer. You had I-71 bringing you back and forth. The state of Ohio was at stake. And then, when White, kind of embarrasses himself a little bit, it added fuel to the fire. But, I look back in my tenure as a Cleveland Brown, and we had the better of the Bengals, and we had the better of the Steelers, and we had the better of the Oilers.
Can we go back to that time?
Yeah, we need to go back today to that time, right? It's missing, but it takes a lot of the right chemistry from the coach to the leaders on both sides to, just the belief to win in the NFL today. And you see it in teams that are consistent with those things And unfortunately, we haven't seen it here. Not through lack of effort.
Definitely not for lack of trying. When you look back at that era, it really was the perfect storm because it was the right coach at the right time, the right mix of players. The one thing that always stands apart, to me anyhow, that group played together on the field and they played together off the field. You guys, your posse was in the 30s and 40s at times when you would go out in town. Talk about that element of liking one another and being a cohesive group where you really actually didn't mind spending time with each other off the field.
It's hard to explain, I mean, how close we were in the late 80s as a team. I hung around on a Thursday night. We'd go to TG Fridays, you know,
Sure.
and have a beer with Dave Pazzulli and Reggie Camp and Carl Big Daddy Harrison and, you know, Brad Van Pelt and whoever.
Yeah.
You know, that was encouraged, you know, not that we got too crazy, but it was the receiver group, and I named them, you know, Slaughter, Langhorne, Gerald McNeil, Clarence Weathers, you know, myself. Herman Fontenot was kind of felt he was a receiver. He was a running back. But, you know, we did a lot together. We wanted to be with each other. A team that's young, right? The athletes are young, and it's this melting pot of people from Baylor and Boston College and, you know, Miami of Florida and, you know, whoever that comes together, and, you know, sometimes that's who you have. Today's athletes seems like they are a brand of their own, and they're just going to surround themselves away from the team and try to market themselves individually. But back then it was this melting pot of players just trying to figure out Cleveland and win games. And
Right.
it seems to me.
It's a much different time.
Much different time.
Early on, when the Browns were having so much success, did you almost take that for granted, like it was perhaps easier than it really was, and felt that this would be a yearly thing and it would go on throughout your career?
No. Heck no. Early on, my first year, Paul McDonald, it wasn't Paul's fault, but, you know, Sam's last year when we brought Marty in halfway through, I think we were, I forget what we were.
You were 1-7.
Yeah, right. And Marty
when Sam was fired.
Yeah, what were we, 5 and whatever, yeah.
4-4 maybe for the.
Yeah, after I forget what we were, but yeah.
Clearly better. There was
so we had a
improvement.
bad season. The next year, you know, Marty was head coach, and he was going to do it his way. We were going to throw the ball only when we needed to.
Yeah, he ran. Yeah.
We ran the ball, and we had 2 1,000-yard rushers in Mack and Biner, and we went down to play Miami in Miami, and we ended up losing in the first round of the playoffs. That was my second year. And then I had a run of playoffs for a long time. So I was, you know, on a good spot.
Yeah.
You know, of my 9 years in the NFL, I went to the playoffs 7.
Wow.
Had 3 AFC Championship losses. That's the wow.
Yeah, that one still leaves a mark.
Yeah, that leaves a mark.
Let's talk about those in the order in which they happened, and we'll start with the drive. What's going through your mind as a helpless observer on the sidelines, watching John and his crew go 98 yards to tie it?
Well, before I do that, you know, Bernie Kosar threw a terrible pass to me, which I ended up catching. No, I'm kidding, Bernie. No.
Is that when you had to come back for?
I came back and I made a catch and we went ahead, and
Right.
you know, it was chance, you know.
That was a terrible pass, and Bernie will tell you it was.
No, he threw it to a spot that worked for everyone.
Right.
And, but you know, I scored this touchdown, and I come to the sidelines, and you know, Gary Danielson and I were from Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we knew each other pretty close. I'm shaking. I'm so excited. We're going to the Super Bowl. You know.
Building shaking.
There's 5 minutes to go, and we kick off, and the ball's on the 2-yard line. And then, you know, John Elway just, you know, methodically marches down the field like it's just like any drive for him, cool and collected, hitting and tearing our prevent defense
Hit a couple
apart.
big 4th and longs, too.
Oh, he did, you know, yeah. He's a great player in the clutch. It was heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah.
And then when it got to overtime, we still felt we were going to win the game.
Yeah.
And we had a chance, and, you know, the kick went over the
I still think
goalpost.
the kick was no
Mark
good.
Mosley, I believe. And it just broke our heart.
Yeah.
We were the better team. We're playing at home. We're 12-4. We just beat, and we had momentum after the Jets game. We had beaten them, and we just let up at the wrong spot. We got a little tight.
Was that the lowest despair you've ever felt as a football player?
That was a hard one, but the following year when we went to Denver, and they had the better season, and they were hosting us in Denver for the AFC Championship. I think we had beaten the Indianapolis Colts, and then we went to Denver, again, it was the battle of the two best teams in the AFC, and again, we had great confidence. And the game that Ernest Byner played was exceptional. I don't know how many yards receiving and running the ball he had, but it was off the charts the game he had. And it was just deflating there. That's probably harder because it was the second year in a row losing to Denver, and we were in Denver and we had to come home.
Was the fumble then, in your mind, worse, at least from how you felt personally, than the drive?
Well, I think the entire team, like I said, it was the second year losing to Denver.
Yeah.
That was hard. And then the fumble was hard because we know how much negatively impacted, Ernest as a player.
Right.
And so we were really, really hurting after that game. And then we had to fly back to Cleveland.
That had to be a tough flight.
It was a tough flight.
Do you remember the time when it was apparent to you that your days in Cleveland were over and that you were going to have to put on another team's helmet? What was that like for you?
I was shocked when, Bill Belichick brought me up to his office and said, we're going in a different direction. You had a great career in Cleveland. Thanks for all you've done. We're cutting you today. We're waiving you today. And we want a bigger, more physical player. You're more of a finesse player. And I was like, really? I didn't have that bad of a season the season before. It was hard. And it was a quick conversation between Bill and I. And then
most of them tend to be.
Yeah, right. Imagine how many words were said by him. And I'm like, and then I call Ernie, of course. I go, Ernie, I just got cut by Bill Belichick. He goes, what?
He didn't know.
He didn't know. And then apparently the next day or within the week, I think he resigned. I don't know what was said, but I don't know if it was because of the way I was released or whatever, but it was hard. It was hard to leave the Browns. And it was equally hard to put on a Bengals uniform. I hated those helmets. Who likes those helmets?
So do I. When you were at the point where you knew it was time to leave the game, take us through that thought process and the emotions that you were experiencing.
So 92 was my last year. I played 9 years, and I was offered, another year with San Diego. And then Bill Cowher, who was the head coach of Pittsburgh, called me up and asked me if I would come to Pittsburgh, and I was kind of a free agent. And I said, I have to think about it. My body wasn't the same. When I went out to San Diego, and we had Nate Lewis, and we had Anthony Miller, and we had Sean Jefferson on the receiver corps. They were like Olympic sprinters. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm in my 9th year. I'm not the same, quick twitch fiber that you once had when you're, their age. And I'm like, and then, I see Junior Seau, who was the greatest. I'd put him in the Ernest Byner camp, one of the toughest guys ever. But, you're seeing these athletes, and then and I'm like, how much longer do I really have in the NFL? Yeah, I could play and be somewhat productive, but, when am I going to transition? When is the right time to transition? I had 3 young kids. I could be here or this city or that city or the next city. I said I wanted something a little bit more solid than trying to continue to play in the NFL for another year or two. I had confidence that I could do something else for sure. And like I said, I followed my brother Marty into the bond world, into Wall Street, and it's paid off pretty well. I think I made the right decision.
Yeah. Did you have, in the short term after your retirement, did you have those moments where you may have second-guessed yourself and thought, maybe I could still be doing this?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The more years you play, the better your pension benefit is,
right.
Except during when I played. Our pension benefit is so poor. So that would be one thing. How many more units can you get for retirement?
Yeah.
But the cost
That's the
benefit.
finance guy thinking.
Yeah, the cost benefit of that versus trying to make a transition when you still have, your mental faculties and everything else.
Right.
So yeah.
How was your transition? Yours is different than many of the players that I've met and talked to over the years, because you've had equal success in your afterlife. Did it always seem like it was going to be that easy for you?
It was hard. I mean,
Was it?
The transition is always hard. When I was playing football, I went and worked for McDonald Investments, which is now part of Key Bank. But Bill Summers, who was running McDonald Investments, offered me, a chance to work at McDonald Investments in the off season.
Wow.
So I went and I got my Series 7 and Series 63, registered rep brokerage licenses, and I became a broker for McDonald, a dealer. And I didn't stay at McDonald. I went to Wall Street to work for Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette at Bond House because my brother Marty was in bonds. But I had to leave my family in Cleveland and work in New York for a period of time and train. And I'd come back on the weekends and I'd stay at the Downtown Athletic Club of all places,
Wow.
which was a pit. And I'd come back and forth. But I really wanted to do well there. And, you have to make sacrifices. So I was going back and forth. And eventually the relationship started to click. And it's been a great career path for me. I love the bond world. It's similar to a football team where you have a team of traders and a team of salespeople and a team of research people, a team of underwriters. You bring it all together and you have one goal, and that is to be, make money.
Yeah,
Really.
That's right. It's not a bad goal.
Yeah.
As you look back on it, any regrets? Anything that you would do different in your playing career?
I was a conservative player. I really prided myself on catching the football. It seems like the athlete today takes more chances. If I don't catch it, so what? I'll get I want to make some sort of a huge play. I was always ensuring that, we got the first down or ensuring the catch. Sometimes, I guess the only regret I would ever have is I wish I was more, less conservative, more liberal in my playing, where I could,
A little more flashy?
not flashy, but a little bit more trying to get the touchdown on every play versus, understanding, it's moving the chains.
What does it say about your personality that, because you were that possession guy, but you were the guy that Bernie, on 3rd and 11, Bernie was finding you more often than other guys, and you were the guy that he tended to rely on in those we've got to have it spots?
I knew where the first down marker was, unlike some of the players today that I watched. But I just felt I knew how important it would be if I didn't catch the ball, rather than break it for 5 more yards.
Were you motivated by fear of failure?
Probably.
Yeah. So you didn't think so much about what it's going to be like when I get in that end zone. You were more thinking, I don't want to be the guy that drops this pass.
Yeah, a little bit of, there are times when depending on the situation, but I try to break it. But, everybody knows their strengths.
How do you want to be remembered by Browns fans?
I hope the Browns fans, or whoever watched me play, thought I gave it all on each play, was a productive player, a good teammate by my teammates, but I hope the fans remember me as somebody that, gave it up their all every play,
Browns fans for years told you every Sunday how they felt about you. What would you like to say to Browns fans about how you feel about them?
I'd just like to thank the global Browns fan. To play for the Cleveland Browns was a real honor. To play in the NFL was a privilege, but to play for the Browns was a real honor. And I just want to thank all the fans who remember when I played.
Do you have one play that you would like to put into a vault somewhere, and that's the play that most describes who you were as a player, or you want that play to reflect the kind of career that you had in the NFL? What play would that be?
Not many people will remember this play, but there is a play, Bernie will, for sure, and maybe other members of my team. When we played Denver in 1989 in the AFC Championship, there was a pass Bernie threw to me, and I had to make a diving catch in the end zone that I ended up catching, and we ended up losing the game. But that play is a play I always remember.
I think more fans remember that than you think.
I know Bernie does.
you were completely laid out, and you needed every single inch of your body to make that catch.
I think that might be true.
Yeah. Brian, thanks a lot. It was great catching up with you, spending time with you. Continued success.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for another edition of Club 46, driven by Bridgestone. Be sure to join us next week when we sit down with another all-time great Cleveland Browns. We'll see you then.